All right, welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to dive right in and decode the foundational chemistry that literally makes life possible. We'll be breaking down this microscopic world by looking strictly at its rules, definitions, a few key examples, and of course, some really fascinating exceptions.
Here's our agenda for today. We've got 1. Elements, compounds, and matter. 2. Inside the atom's structure. 3. The rules of chemical bonds. 4. Why molecular shape matters. And 5. Chemical reactions and equilibrium.
To really see why this matters, picture a wood ant defending its colony by shooting formic acid into the air. Or, just think about yourself digesting your breakfast. At the end of the day, biology is fundamentally just chemistry in highly organized action.
Okay, let's jump into section 1. Elements, compounds, and matter, the building blocks.
So, the first rule we need to establish is that matter is made of elements, which can combine to form compounds. And here's the wild part. These compounds have entirely new, emergent properties. Like, take pure sodium, which is a highly reactive metal, and mix it with chlorine, which is literally a poisonous gas. What do you get? You get sodium chloride, an explosive metal and a toxic gas combined to make the completely safe, edible table salt you put on your fries. Crazy, right?
Now, when it comes to living organisms, the elemental rule is surprisingly simple. Out of the 92 naturally occurring elements out there, just 4 of them, oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen, make up about 96% of your body mass. So life, despite being incredibly complex, relies on a really restricted chemical palette.
But of course, there's an exception to this bulk rule, and that involves what we call trace elements. Think of things like iron for your blood or iodine for your thyroid. You only need these in microscopic amounts. We're talking usually less than 0.01% of your total mass. But make no mistake, without those tiny, minute quantities, your biological systems would completely fail.
Moving right along to section 2, inside the atom's structure, subatomic rules and radioactive exceptions.
The core rule here is that an atom's identity is strictly determined by its atomic number, and that's just the exact count of protons in its nucleus. You see, positively charged protons and neutral neutrons pack super tightly into a dense core. Meanwhile, the negatively charged electrons exist in this sprawling cloud, just buzzing around the nucleus, kind of like tiny gnats swarming around a massive stadium.
Now, while the general rule states that atoms of the same element always have the exact same number of protons, the exception to this rule is found in isotopes. Isotopes are just versions of an element that have different numbers of neutrons. While some are perfectly stable, others are highly unstable and radioactive. That means their nucleus just spontaneously decays, shooting off particles and energy. And scientists actually use this radioactive exception as a diagnostic tool. Take radiometric dating, for example. Because a radioactive isotope like carbon-14 decays at a perfectly fixed rate, it has a half-life of exactly 5,730 years. We can track this predictable timeline. It lets us determine the exact age of ancient fossils just by looking at the ratio of isotopes left inside them.
Okay, let's look back at those electrons buzzing outside the nucleus. Their potential energy follows a very strict physical rule. They exist only in fixed energy shells. Think of a ball bouncing down a flight of stairs. It can only rest on specific steps, right? It can never just magically float between them. Electrons are exactly the same way. They can only exist at certain fixed energy levels.
All right, section 3. The rules of chemical bonds, how atoms interact.
The primary rule of atomic interaction in biology is the covalent bond. You see, atoms absolutely hate having incomplete outer electron shells. So to achieve stability, 2 atoms will come together and physically share a pair of their outermost electrons. This sharing creates an incredibly strong bond, and it's what holds the molecules of your cells firmly together.
Alternatively, an ionic bond follows a totally different procedure. Instead of sharing nicely, one highly electronegative atom entirely strips an electron away from a weaker atom. It's a complete theft. This creates a positively charged ion and a negatively charged ion. And just like magnets, these opposing charges lock together into crystalline structures, which we commonly call salts.
Now, the crucial exception to these extremely strong covalent and ionic bonds are weak chemical interactions, like van der Waals forces. These happen when electrons momentarily accumulate on one side of a molecule, creating a really fleeting weak charge. Individually, they are incredibly fragile, but collectively, they are so powerful they literally allow a gecko to walk straight up a smooth glass wall. Nature is amazing like that.
Let's hit section 4.
Why molecular shape matters. Structure dictates function.
Here's the deal. Biological molecules recognize and respond to each other based on complementary shapes. It's exactly like a key fitting into a lock. Notice how the structure of the morphine molecule perfectly matches the shape of your body's naturally produced endorphins. The receptor in your brain honestly can't tell the difference, it only reads the physical shape. This is what allows a synthetic opiate to completely trick your brain into relieving pain.
Finally, Section 5, Chemical Reactions and Equilibrium, Making and Breaking Bonds. The absolute ironclad rule of any chemical reaction is the conservation of matter. Reactions cannot just create atoms out of thin air, nor can they destroy them into nothingness. They can only rearrange them. You start with specific starting materials or reactants, you break their bonds, and you redistribute those exact same atoms to form entirely new products. A perfect, highly visible example of this atomic rearrangement is photosynthesis. A plant takes carbon dioxide from the air and water from the ground, right? It uses the energy of sunlight to break those bonds and then meticulously rearranges those exact atoms into glucose for food. Then it simply releases the leftover oxygen as visible bubbles. But here is a fascinating exception to our everyday common-sense understanding of the word equilibrium. In chemistry, equilibrium does not mean you have equal amounts of reactants and products. Not at all. It simply means that the forward reaction and the reverse reaction are happening at the exact same rate. Their concentrations have just stabilized at a particular ratio.
So, what does this all mean? The crucial point here is that life relies on perfectly balanced, highly specific chemical rules and shapes. But as human industry continues to manufacture entirely new synthetic chemical shapes that have literally never existed in nature, it leaves us with a pretty provocative question. Will our ancient biological locks recognize these new synthetic keys, or will they just jam the system entirely? It's definitely something to think about as you review today's explainer. Keep learning and keep asking questions.